Welcome everyone to a very special show. This week we are marking 2 years of the October 7th massacre, which unleashed not just a regional military war, it unleashed a war of legitimacy and it opened the mask of all of this anti-Semitic hatred that has happened all around the world. And I couldn't think of a better group of people, experts, to discuss what's happened here over the last 2 years and what it means to our country, to the Jewish people, and to the entire world than the people that are sitting right next to me, who are all hosts of JNS, very popular podcasts. So Doron Spielman, he is an ex-IDF spokesperson who also was called to the flag during this war to be able to represent us in the narrative war, and the author of a New York Times bestseller called
When the Stones Speak.
When the Stones Speak. Thank you for being with us, Doron. Danny Seaman, who is the legendary head of the government press office and also Deputy Director General of the Public Diplomacy Ministry when we had one, Danny. And of course, the host of his own show here in JNS. And Josh Haston, who is the host of 2 shows, Judaization and Jerusalem Minute, and also Middle East correspondent for JNS, and the one and only, my good friend, Ruthie Bloom, senior contributing editor of JNS and co-host of her own show too, Israel Undiplomatic. Okay, it's been quite the 2 years. I don't think ever, when I made Aliyah in 2001, never did I imagine for 1 second that an October the 7th event could possibly happen in our country. In fact, the reason we have a country, the reason we came back to our homeland was so that would never happen again to the Jewish people. And on the 7th of October 2 years ago, we found ourselves in an incredibly compromised situation, 251 hostages taken, a terrible massacre, both of a festival, both of the kibbutzim in the south of the country. And I don't know about you, but we'll discuss it in a minute. My life changed forever. I lost a sense of innocence. I lost a sense of hope for a while. And I also lost a sense of trust in the country that I believed was protecting me. And there are many reasons why October the 7th happened. And this is not the episode today. But what I do want to talk about is where we are now in comparison and in contrast to where we were on October 7th. Why did we go into October 7th and how we've come out after 2 years from this incredibly terrible and tragic moment in Jewish history. So Doron, you are the military expert here on the panel. You served as a professional soldier in the IDF for many years. You were the mouthpiece for the army during these very difficult moments. When you look at what has transpired in terms of militarily against 7 military fronts, non-state actors as well as states, what can you tell us to summarize these 2 years in terms of where Israel finds itself now militarily in the region?
You know, Fleur, it all, at the end of the day, boils down to the young men and women who are manning these posts.
Yeah.
Every attack, whether it was our cyber attacks, our beeper attacks, the battles on the ground, boil down to men and women who are willing to risk their lives to defend this country. The big change is that before October 7th, we were an army that was inexperienced. We were an army, not only our soldiers were not used to major battles, their commanders mostly had not faced major battles.
Really?
Yes, the largest battle before was 9 years before in Gaza.
And short.
And very, very short, a few weeks long, Operation Protective Shield. And if you look at other armies, for instance, Hezbollah carried out a massive war. They were one of the most experienced forces in the world, having battled ISIS in Syria. And so when we would go for our military drills, it was all on paper. We would do military drills with the United States, and we had not actually drilled. Today, 2 years later, Israeli men and women are one of the most battle-experienced forces in the entire world, having faced Hamas, Islamic Jihad, Hezbollah. In Yemen, the Houthis, whose name we didn't even know before, Iran, militias in Iraq, and other operations around the world that we're not even speaking about. The men and women of Israel today, who are 21, 22, and 23 years old, have shown a commitment and an expertise that have toppled regimes all throughout the Middle East. So if you ask me, what has changed in 2 years? with the major military blow that we suffered on October 7th, I think the hope and the optimism towards the future, which you feel when you're here, when you look at these young people who are willing to defend this country and know how, they can lead us into the future for the next 100 years.
Well, I completely agree. And I think that was a very pivotal moment to test. I mean, none of us wish we would have been in that moment at all. But in that moment, when the youth of the world are into their iPhones and I this and I that, the Israeli youth essentially showed us all that they were there for their country and for their people. All the soldiers that came also from abroad, Jewish boys and girls, who basically got on a plane from their comfortable lives and said, we're fighting for our people, we're going to put our lives on the line for our people. I don't think there's one country on earth where that would be happening today, only Israel. So I take a lot of hope from what you're telling me. It's just a shame we had to go through this horrible, horrible experience to be able to see the value of our youth. And so that does give us a lot of hope. Josh, I want to come to you because you're an expert on Judea and Samaria. And what Doron is talking about, of course, is the multiple fronts. But there's a front that we have been facing is kind of quiet in terms of the media attention to it. But it's a cruel and hard front altogether. And we're not even talking about what could happen the day after Gaza if there's a deal. And at the moment, we're in the throes of this deal. What is your assessment to what we have achieved over the last 2 years in Judea and Samaria and what could be achieved further from the moment we have a ceasefire in Gaza?
Sure. First, I just want to say, Fleur, thanks for hosting. And also in terms of the young, brave men and women who showed up in Israel to serve in the army, we're the only country in the world where Iran is launching rockets, missiles at us, and hundreds of thousands of Israelis are scrambling.
Trying to get in.
Planes, boats, helicopters, all kinds of things. I actually was stuck in the U.S. at the time. It's unbelievable how people are fleeing the United States to come to Israel to the front lines of a war, trying everything possible.
It's the only country on earth.
Nothing like that. But in terms of Judea and Samaria, listen, the writing was on the wall back, I would say, in 1993, when Israel went down the path of Oslo. Anytime you make concessions to your enemies, okay, and they see weakness, this is the Middle East, this is not the Middle West, by any stretch of the imagination where I'm from.
Yeah.
So anytime you make concessions, your enemies in this region seize upon it. Obviously, no one could have seen the scope of October the 7th. But that being said, when Israel made the policy in 2005 to pull out every man, woman, and child out of Gaza, civilians, as well as all IDF military presence in that area, you had Hamas immediately launch rockets, which increased by 500%, and then take over Gaza 2 years later. And they got busy working for the last 20 years on the terror tunnels, on the rocket launching capabilities. So on one hand, the scope of October the 7th was completely shocking, horrifying, or whatnot. But if you see what the leaders in Judea and Samaria said then and are saying now is, we cannot allow anything like that to ever happen again. We cannot turn over areas of land for promises of peace and hope this time it's going to be different. We saw what happened on October the 7th. We cannot have it again where the terrorists are on the hills overlooking our international airport, overlooking 75% of our population in the greater Tel Aviv area, and hoping for different results. We know what they will do if they have the capabilities. So we must pay attention to the mistakes we made in the past, years before October 7th, on the 7th itself, and make sure something like that doesn't ever happen again.
Absolutely. And there are talks of tunnels, and we already saw a rocket fired towards Ben Gurion Airport. So we can't afford to lose one single war, especially one that is a few hundred meters from here, as you know.
Absolutely.
And turning to the 8th front, because we all know, because we're all on the front lines of the narrative war. And it's been a cruel war. And unfortunately, only a few days ago, we see the results of that cruel war when 2 innocent Jewish people going to their Yom Kippur services get rammed and stabbed in the UK. And to me, that's definitely part of the narrative war against us. And of course, the masks of the classic anti-Semites, the Islamic anti-Semites, the woke anti-Semites, and everybody else. Danny, you led efforts for the government for many years to fight this war. How have we failed so colossally in the last 2 years? Or is it our failure?
I don't think it's a failure, not because we haven't been weak in that area. I think it's essentially an arena where we're at a disadvantage. And if we had been at a disadvantage politically or diplomatically for many years, once social media started, initially we had a certain advantage because for the first time the Israeli public were taking, and not the government.
Sure.
And back in 2012, in an operation at that time, was the first time we used social media. And that was the first time that I had seen, and I mentioned that to Netanyahu at the time, that for the first time I saw a game changer. That was social media. And I think it still affects things today. You have two levels here. One is the official level, not government, I mean media. Government address the media, but you have the media on one level, and then you have the general public.
Yeah.
In the media, we've been at a disadvantage for many years, for political reasons, for in the unprofessional behavior of journalists for many years when it comes to Israel. But the public, if you take the same way with when people address the public here in Israel, what you get abroad is what you see in Haaretz newspaper or other channels from Israel that doesn't reflect the true beliefs of the Israeli citizens, which do not share the opinions of Haaretz. Last week, Trump spoke about, in his speech, he spoke about how the Israeli public wants the war to end. Yes, we all want the war to end, but not the way that Haaretz newspaper is presenting it. We want it to end in total victory of Israel and the total elimination of any future threats. And what you didn't get for many years is how the Israeli public feel. And what we saw here, and a lot of people see that, is the mobilization of the Israeli civilians, not only those going to war, but those supporting our soldiers, our men and women, our young men and women, how the whole society here mobilized for it and was able to withstand for 2 years, to stand up to all the pressures. I give a lot of credit to the Jewish community abroad and supporters of Israel abroad. And any polls conducted in England or in France and other places, just take the Eurovision, for example, when the public in Europe voted for the Israeli song and supported Israel, while the officials and the technocrats were sucking up to the general opinion. The public around the world understand what's going on here. It's not reflected in their media either. So you have that. And I'm saying that the government in Israel, rightfully so, should take a step back, not intervene, let the public engage. You interview a lot of these influencers that we've seen around the world that have been here to Israel. You interview them, you talk to them. They have an effect on what is happening. People look at that, people understand that. And when it's original, when it's from the average individual, it's authentic, and people listen to that because they see what they're getting, and that's a true reflection. So there, I think we have been successful, surprisingly. I'm glad that the government isn't involved, because government has its bureaucracy. Government shouldn't be involved. Let the people continue. JNS has risen very much in the past 2 years because people are seeing what JNS has to offer, and that's where we should continue doing our effort.
I think you're being very optimistic. I agree that JNS has done an incredible job. That's why we're all here. But ultimately, I believe there's a lack of leadership when it comes to strategy for the communications war. And I think a lot of Jewish communities around the world feel that lack of leadership. I don't think we take our diplomatic appointments seriously enough. It's hit and miss. It's whoever somebody wants in this position, not necessarily the best people. And I think that we have to step up our game. I really, really do. And, you know, I say this because I want to improve things. I'm not saying because I want to criticize to break things down. I'm saying because I think this is something that we're lacking. And I wish that our communication strategy was anywhere as near a military and intelligence strategy, because we'd be in a completely different place.
They don't have the financial.
Well, whose fault is that?
Well, we're at a number disadvantage internationally. You know, there are hundreds and billions of people against Israel. When you have, we're lucky 100 million in our favor, but also the money that's spent in that. Israel doesn't have those kind. I'd rather they spend it on the missiles and on the defense of Israel than they do on the.
I think there's more money than we think. And I think it's all about priorities, and it has to be a priority. And I think that we all have to advocate for that to be a priority. Okay, moving on to what's happening these days. Houthi, the ceasefire on the table, which was presented by Trump a few days ago, almost as a fait accompli. Here you go. I think the smartest thing about this strategy is that it got the Arab countries to sign off on it. I think that was actually genius. Presented it to Hamas as a fait accompli. Of course, we know Hamas's tricks. They'll say, yes, we accepted it, and then they'll present a completely different plan than the one that Trump sent to them. How do you see this playing out?
Okay, well, I'm both optimistic and pessimistic. Pessimistic because I'm always pessimistic when it comes to our Arab neighbors and others such as Turkey, all right? It's all well and good that President Trump got them all together. But you have to remember that Qatar is Israel's enemy. Egypt has Israel has a peace treaty with Egypt, but Egypt has come out and said we're the enemy. All right, and Egypt has enabled
said it so openly.
said it openly, and has enabled the building of all the tunnels in Gaza. Has prevented any Gazan from coming into Egypt, not even into the Sinai during this whole war, and criticizes Israel for committing so-called genocide, which Israel is not doing, but didn't lift a finger to help a single Gazan. So that's Egypt. We have Qatar, which is Hamas and houses Hamas. We have Turkey, that is a sworn enemy of Israel's. So it's all well and good. Let's get them all together. The good part about it is that now they can't, when President Trump said, okay, well, if Hamas doesn't return all the hostages, for example, and doesn't disarm, then all bets are off, and Israel can act as it needs to. And if the Arab leaders or that whole group I mentioned is on board with that, fine. However, all right, Trump has said several times since he was elected, he's been on Israel's side. I have to praise, I have only praise for how he has been towards Israel. But he keeps saying, if this doesn't happen, then all the gates of hell will open, or all hell will break loose. But what does that even mean?
Yeah.
You know why? It doesn't mean anything. Because he said, I know what I would do. And it sort of implied that he would just carpet bomb Gaza. We're never going to do that. I'm not saying we should, okay? We are moral. It's not just our army is moral, our public is moral. We're not going to do that. And if we had wanted to do it, we could have done it on October 8th.
Yeah.
Gaza is tiny as Israel is. Gaza is even tinier. We could have just wiped the whole place out. But we care about not hurting civilians, and certainly we didn't want to inadvertently kill hostages.
Yes.
And that's still true today.
Yeah.
So my concern right now is this. If Hamas is up against the wall and still, though, is acting as though it's got the cards, and it does in a way because it still has 48 hostages.
Yeah.
Now, so my question is this. What if not? If they don't return all the hostages, then what? Are we prepared? When I say we, I mean, first of all, Israel and also the United States, secondly, because this is an Israeli interest. Then what? And here I'm a little skeptical because I've seen, now you said when you came to Israel in 2001, you thought that you wouldn't have believed that an October 7th could have happened.
Yeah.
Well, I came here in 1977 and I would have believed it. Not so much, I wouldn't have believed that we'd be so surprised.
Yes.
Okay, though in the Yom Kippur War we were taken.
Yes.
But I'll tell you why I wasn't surprised. I wasn't surprised by the rapes, beheadings, arson. That didn't surprise me because these animals are the same ones that have been there threatening us. By the way, they say so. And in the Palestinian Authority media, it says so.
Yeah.
And the Palestinian Authority, which everyone says is the moderates, not Hamas, they pay terrorists, but they also preach it. And so nothing that they did on October 7th was a surprise. The surprise was that Israel wasn't prepared, that our security services, in whom we trusted so much, weren't prepared.
They weren't prepared. As Doron said, we weren't battle ready. And Doron, you saw the map that President Trump shared, I think last night, on his social media about where Israel will be retrieving if this thing goes ahead, as we're looking into in the next few days. Are these defensible positions as far as you're concerned?
I think there's something deeper, Floor. And when we speak about October 7th, what we've learned over 2 years, it is a paradigm shift that we have to make as the Jewish state, away from a ghetto mentality where we have a boss, a funder, and a patron that's going to call the shots, to becoming an independent regional power.
Yeah.
President Trump loves the state of Israel.
Yeah.
He's put Prime Minister Netanyahu under unbelievable pressure, and Prime Minister Netanyahu sees the holes in the plan, and he's going for it. However, we have to acknowledge reliance on the United States is one of the major flaws that brought us to October 7th in the first place. I was called into service on October 7th. By the morning of October 8th, we realized that we have no bombs to put on our planes to bomb the north in case Hezbollah invades. Why? Because our entire military agreement with the United States was premised, in fact, was broken by the Biden administration. Therefore, we were left without missiles and rockets. I think the conversation isn't whether the United States gives us the go-ahead to open the gates of hell. I agree with Ruthie. This has been said numerous times.
Yeah.
Israel has got to send a clear message, absolutely a clear message. We are going to take care of our own problems. This is the paradigm shift we need to do. If we don't make that message, then the United States will step into the vacuum.
Yeah.
But when we look at the map yesterday, these are not defensible borders, and I'll explain why. If we look very carefully at this plan, we know two things. For sure, Hamas wants to destroy Israel, and Hamas wants to survive. If Hamas agrees to any part of this plan, that's where we can see that this plan won't work and it's indefensible. If we want to know the problem with the plan, look to see what Hamas accepts.
Exactly.
What does Hamas accept? They haven't raised hell over the fact that the Palestinian Authority appeared, and Josh and I were speaking about this off camera, that the Palestinian Authority at least has an open to take over Gaza. Now, why is that? Because the Palestinian Authority was already responsible for Gaza. In fact, I was there pulling out my friends in 2005, unfortunately. 2005, Palestinian Authority was in charge. 2006 and 2007, Hamas was voted in. They took the heads of the Palestinian Authority up to 12-story buildings and threw them off.
Yeah.
So when they say that the Palestinian Authority can be in, they'll just do the exact same thing again.
Absolutely. Or they'll be in cahoots with them.
Or they'll
because
be in
they-
cahoots.
Yeah.
And the technocrats that they've
Yeah.
agreed to put in place. Technocrats in the Arab world, can we think of a single Arab country that is run well as a democracy, that is run by nice Department of State technocrats?
Well, there's
they're
no democracy in the Arab
There's no democracy. There's no democracy here. They are all simply the minions of those who control them. So therefore, Hamas is open to the Palestinian Authority taking over. They're open to technocrats because they can take over. They don't want to disarm. I think the deal as we see it, and I understand the emotional side of the deal, and I want the hostages home, and I have friends that have died in this battle. The plan as it is now is simply turning back the clock by another, let's say, 3 months, giving it another 3 months to tick forward until Hamas is in charge of Gaza, and we are in an absolutely indefensible place. And that is because President Trump, in his own goodwill, doesn't live here. And we have to go back to the basics and do what we need to do, make our own decisions to finish this once and for all.
What does it mean, finish this once and for all? What does that look like?
I think the model, and it's been talked about before, is what happened with Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan in World War II. We have grown up believing, since America is a wonderful country, hasn't won any wars definitively in the last 80 years, that wars can't be won.
Right.
It's simply not true. Wars can be won. In fact, wars against Muslims have been won before.
Yeah.
Wars against Germany, Nazi Germany have been won before. You break the back of your enemy completely. It's a tough job to do. You root them out. We take over Gaza City, which we're probably 2 months away from doing. You move into the middle communities of Gaza and you destroy Hamas's command structure. And what you're left with are individual entities that are hiding that you hunt down. When that takes place, you will see the Gazan people rise up. You will see the clans rise up. You will see a different reality. It will break the ethos of Hamas that they're establishing a caliphate in Israel. That still exists.
Oh, yeah.
And when that breaks, there's an opportunity for us to go in and choose whatever option you want. But until that takes place, nothing's going to work. But I believe it can be done. We just have to finish it. We're so close. We're months away, 2 to 3 months away, Fleur, from actually getting this done.
Well, I mean, all we have to do, and I think that this is Netanyahu's genius, is actually accepting the plan. Because, as you say, if Hamas accepts, whatever they accept is what they believe is going to keep them going. The question is if we can get our hostages home and then do what you're saying, or the guarantees, or everybody else will stop us, or, and I put this to you, Danny, is there any type of scenario where our Abraham Accords partners or potential partners like Saudi Arabia somehow become more involved, and when Arabs are dealing with Arabs, nobody's looking, they have de-radicalized their societies. The UAE certainly has. Saudi have made a really great effort of trying to de-radicalize their societies, changing the educational system, kicking out the Muslim Brotherhood. Is there a way, and this was always my hope, maybe it's a little naive, that we could bring in a consortium of these moderate Sunni countries, and that could be the game changer? Or, as Doron says, it has to be us. We're the only people who can do this job.
We're the only people who can do this job.
Okay.
So let's start with that. And I think we are ready because there has been a shift in the mindset in Israel. I think first and foremost it was Netanyahu himself. He was the great appeaser for many years.
Well, I wouldn't say appease, I would say conflict manager.
maybe managing, but he was more trying to he wanted to bring
Status
Israel
quo.
to, but he wanted to run Israel to breathe. This place will be safe for the Jewish people. And he understood doing it the way the left wing wanted doesn't work here in the Middle East.
No.
And I think the one reason that brought all these Arabs to agree with Arab nations and Muslim nations agree to what Trump wants to do is because of what happened in Qatar. Because if you saw immediate 2 or 3 days after the incident in Qatar, all the Arab nations and all the Muslim nations met, and they all decided they're going to create this Arab army against Israel to protect one another. We scared the crap out of them.
Yeah, we did.
And not because it was such a tough thing that we did, it's because this wasn't the Israel that they recognized. This is a different Israel. This is the Israel that they were always afraid of. And if you add to that what we did to Iran, what we did to Yemen, what we did to Syria, what we've been doing to protect Syrian minorities, all these things that we've done, Netanyahu has been the one pushing this. It changed and shifted everything in the Middle East. They're not going to get together because they are incapable of getting together. So if Trump can offer them an alternative where they don't have to show that they're not able to manage themselves, they're all going to go for it because they don't want to screw around with Israel anymore.
Yeah.
And that's the message. And that's, in my eyes, the most hopeful thing that has come out of this, that Israel is different today. This is the message we're sending.
We restored deterrence. Have we restored deterrence in Judea and Samaria, Josh?
That's a good question. I mean, I know that people don't really understand at this point that our soldiers are in battle, not on the Gaza front, but in Judea and Samaria on a nightly basis. And this goes back to 2002 when the so-called Second Intifada or Oslo War took place, when Yasser Arafat, another Arab leader who rejected every single offer that Israel put in his path, Israel decided we are going to go back into those areas A, B, and C throughout Judea and Samaria. And that was really the difference between Judea and Samaria and Gaza. Gaza, we didn't have boots on the ground anymore after 2005. We didn't have communities. We didn't have soldiers.
No intelligence.
Not intelligence that practically we know of. Obviously, there's still people on the ground undercover. But that being said, that's the difference. Israel has the ability in Judea and Samaria to go into the villages on a nightly basis, make arrests, confiscate weapons. Right now, the rocket threat, I'm very, very nervous about the rocket threat.
too.
Not only for the communities where I live in Judea and Samaria, for Tel Aviv.
For Jerusalem.
Rosh Hashanah, for Jerusalem.
The airport.
Absolutely.
It destroys your economy if you have.
But looking at it optimistically, because of the fact that Israel is now seizing those rockets before they're being launched, taking apart the rocket infrastructure, taking apart the terror cells on a nightly basis, I'm more optimistic that it's not going to get to a point where it did in Gaza, where they have free reign, where they can build tunnels, where they can do these things without and a daily IDF presence, making sure it doesn't ever, God forbid, get to another October 7th.
We're awake now. That's
Yeah, absolutely. And we're there. The IDF is there. Wherever you have an Israeli presence, whether it's civilians and the army, wherever there are Jews, wherever there are Israelis, I should say, that is where you have quiet, more or less. Wherever you withdraw for peace, that's where you have conflict, that's where you have war.
So, Ruthie, when we look at the Palestinian Authority, of course, I agree with everything you say about them. I was very involved in the whole idea of trying to change the school curriculum, not just in Judea and Samaria, but in Jerusalem, where the schools in Jerusalem that the government was paying for were teaching the same curriculum they were teaching in Gaza. What's the alternative? What's the alternative?
Well, look, what I'm going to say is very, I would say, unpopular among,
Ruthie, you unpopular? No.
Look, I've thought all along that the only way to guarantee this stuff is to have Jewish settlement in all of these areas. And I say that as a secular Jew, okay? Mm-hmm. I say that not as someone who is saying the land belongs to us because God gave it to us in the Bible, though that is true. That isn't where I'm coming from with this. I will just tell you that I went down as a journalist to Gush Katif in Gaza right before all the Jews were yanked out of there. And by the way, my son, who has been a reservist every war and this one too, and he also fought 10 years ago in Gaza, and he also was a soldier during disengagement. I went down to the Gaza border to interview families who are about to be evacuated. And I remember looking at that place, and also when you saw photographs from the air of that place, see a beautiful community. Lawns, children on their little tricycles, flowers, houses with, thatched roofs or whatever, red tile roof, whatever. Really pretty area. Right next to it, mud, crap, children walking barefoot, Arabs whose parents weren't paying attention to them, these children, these neglected children, filth. And I said, imagine a Martian coming down in a spaceship and saying, okay, take a look at this area. Which people are getting kicked out of it? Yeah. You wouldn't believe that the people getting kicked out are the peaceful ones planting the flowers, etc. Now, what's also interesting, and this is also going to be unpopular, the kibbutzim along the border that were invaded on October 7th. And most of those people suffered the worst atrocities and the kidnappings, in addition to the Nova Festival.
Yeah.
These are people who wanted those Jews in Gush Katif kicked out. And their argument was, first of all, they're all religious, they're settlers or whatever. Second, the argument was, our country can't afford to protect, to waste manpower and security services on this group of people. It's just a waste and we can't do it. And they're settlers and they're an obstacle to peace. So get rid of them. And then those kibbutzim became the border community. And they were genuinely peace-loving. We're going to have peace now, peace, peace, peace. They drove Gazans to hospitals. All they did was want to make peace with their neighbors.
Yeah.
And their neighbors were welcome in their home, and they gave them jobs, and we gave them work permits, and that's what happened. So my feeling is also about Judea and Samaria. I know the Prime Minister Netanyahu said recently, do me a favor, people. I mean, I'm paraphrasing. Do me a favor, could you leave that issue off the table right now? Because even Trump said, no, forget about annexing Judea and Samaria. And I say this, I understand why he said it. Let's take first things first here. However, it is not enough to have military presence in all of these places. And as I said, I wouldn't want to live in one of them. I like living in Tel Aviv where there's cafes everywhere, okay? Yeah. But what I say is without Jewish presence as families, Jewish life in those areas, what, we're going to just be a military presence everywhere? No. You need Jews living there and having children there and going to school there. And so that's why I said it's going to be unpopular, because I know we're not supposed to say, and it's not annexing, because it is ours. Yeah. It's extending our sovereignty to the land that is ours.
Absolutely. And honestly, to wrap up, I know it's difficult in one sentence. Your own lives. How has your life changed since the 7th of October?
Well, I can say when I look at my kids, I know I can't change what happened on October 7th, 2023, what I saw there. But we can change how we raise our children. And I see the passion in my children and in this young generation. And I think that we can change the way we look back at this, and our children are the key.
Annie?
I have to follow up on this. I agree. This generation rose to the occasion, and they were beyond anything we could have imagined. You see them embracing the Jewish tradition. You don't see this in the international media or even in most left-wing Israeli media. But any of us at home sees this, how these kids, I know that my son with the paratroopers, they came back, they're all wearing the tzitzit, not necessarily a kippah, but the tzitzit became a very important defensive measure for them in the combat. I see this in my daughter, who became an officer in the IDF because she felt she wants to continue contributing. I have my third son, he decided to delay his service for 6 months, going up to the a pre-military school in the Gaza area to help them rebuild and reconstruct. They are all representative of this generation. We're fortunate to have these kids. I think we did one thing right. We brought them up, and I think they'll take us into a wonderful future. And this generation is our promise.
Amen. Josh?
I agree with what was said here by my colleagues. And Danny, that's why I always say, he may not have a yarmulke keep on his head, but I always say Danny Seaman is my rabbi. Always. But I want to stick to, in all seriousness.
I come from a family of rabbis.
There you go. I had no doubt.
It's your destiny, Danny. You can't avoid it.
But I want to stick to the, from a spiritual perspective, whether it's, physical observance or, right after October the 7th, there was, I think, unity in this country like never before.
Yeah.
I think you would all agree to that. Unfortunately, sometimes it takes, what happened and conflict and such a tragedy and all of that to create that unity. My hope and my dream is here, reflecting 2 years later, is that we have a sense of unity when things are good. When I don't know if it's ever going to be normal in this country, but perhaps one day we'll wake up and it'll be a little bit less stressed or a little bit less conflict that we have now. I don't know when that day is going to happen, but I think a sense of unity, whether you disagree with somebody or not, left, right, center, whatever it is, and I'm not a Mr. Kumbaya, but I think, from a spiritual perspective, the unity that we had right after this horrible, horrible massacre, October 7th, if we could regain that and experience that on a daily basis, I think our future is very, very bright. I don't think any enemy can defeat us if we are unified, if we are one.
We've proven that, Ruthie.
Okay, so I don't want to burst Josh's bubble. So instead, I'm going to compete with Danny because I want Josh to call me his Rebbitzin. Okay.
Happy to do so.
Okay. And that is that I saw also with my own kids, I also have grandchildren, and I have to say the one sad part is I see these little kids knowing, okay, there's a siren, got to go to the bomb shelter, come on, let's go, to watch them be in a panic or get used to that kind of thing. It's really awful as far as I'm concerned. But my son, for example, was in the army, and he's secular as well. He spent so much time putting on tefillin, and I said to him, I saw pictures of he was praying, and his soldier, he sent me pictures of them praying in Gaza on holidays and Friday night. And I said to him, do you remember how to do it? Do you remember how to put it on? He said, they all helped me. Mm-hmm. And it was so beautiful to watch. And this is someone who's normally cynical. He's not cynical about Judaism, he's just cynical in general. And he was so moved, and there is so much of that. Even the secular soldiers and reservists, we also have to make a point of stressing that the reservists have done an amazing thing. And that they really have sort of returned to their Judaism.
Yeah. That's the unity we have to replicate in civilian life, not just in army life. And to me, I have a more kind of universal perspective of October 7th. I think it's the moment that it was our worst tragedy in modern history, but I think it's the moment that the world finally woke up at the slow colonization of Islamism in the world. I think that was a pivotal moment. Without October 7th, even though we suffered the worst losses, the world would have sleptwalked into Islamic caliphate. That's the way I see it. Maybe I'm being a doomsday person. But because it's Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles here, I wanted to finish our wonderful broadcast with something that I read from Rabbi Steinsaltz that talks about the sukkah as a permanent place. Why, we're in our country, we're sovereign in our nation. Why are we still celebrating Sukkot, which is celebrating the kind of transient nature of the Jewish people moving from place to place? And this really spoke to me, and this was written way before October 7th. And it says it's important to celebrate Sukkot, and it's important to understand that type of transience nature is because permanence leads to complacency, smugness, and carefreeness. These qualities prevent a person from perceiving dangers and threats, whether external or internal.
Wow.
Prophetic words from Rabbi Steinsaltz about why Sukkot is important. So we are commemorating one of the worst episodes in our history, but we also have to remember that we're doing this in a feast that reminds us that the Jewish people, we always have to be alert, we have to be united, and that's really our secret sauce and our secret to our success. And so we pray that by the time next week comes along, our hostages will be home, and that we have quiet on all fronts, and that we can move to do what the Jewish people do best: build, be productive, save the world from so many different things. And so for all of you out there, thanks for watching us for the whole year. Thanks for talking to us. Thanks for experiencing this very terrible last few years with us. And in the end, we will prevail. Thank you.